All right, historians, howdy, how are ya? Mr. Montgomery once again coming to you from room 112 in Advanced Placement U.S. History. We are continuing on here as we talk about imperial policy and control for the colonies. So, in our last lesson, in our first part of the video, we looked at imperial control and mercantilism. Now we're going to look at imperial control of politics and the Glorious Revolution, and then eventually we'll get down to those seeds of liberty. So that's where we are. You know the reminders. Make sure you know the vocab. Take notes as we go. Pause it if you need to. Answer the wrap-up questions once you're all done, so that way we are all on the same page and we are all good to go and know what's happening. So last time we looked at all this info about imperial control and mercantilism. Now we're going to look at imperial control and political systems. So some of this is a little bit of review, some of this is new. So the first thing that we want to review a little bit is that every colony has a royal governor. And this royal governor is there in place to enforce the rules of the king. However, we know that the colonists find ways around this. Every colonial assembly found ways to assert their authority and their independence. They would pass illegal laws and just see if they'd hold up. They would withhold the governor's salary because they had the power of the purse in an effort to try to get the governor to be more friendly to them or be more lax in his enforcement of the crown's policies. But there was lots of bickering and some poor royal administration between the colonists and the royal governors, and this prolonged irritation on both sides ultimately fueled a spirit of revolution. So the royal governors are there, but the colonists control their salary, and the royal governors are very far away from the crown. Again, the law of proximity. So the colonists find ways to work with the royal governors, but some are more burdensome than others. But what the colonists all want is a sense of self-government. They have their two-house legislative bodies. They're used to voting. They're used to having their rights observed. We know about the colonial charters guaranteeing the rights of Englishmen. So the colonists are used to having some autonomy here and some self-government, despite the fact that the royal governors are there. Also, every colony not only has its colonial government, it also has its local governments and administrations. So these are going to be town hall style in New England. They're going to be more county style in the Chesapeake and the middle colonies and the areas that are less inhabited. And there's not going to be a lot of local government in the South because they're so spread out and they had more of that planter aristocracy. So in the plantation South, county government, again, town meeting government in New England, and kind of a mixture of the two in the Chesapeake. But what we saw, no matter if it was the colonial government or the local governments, Americans, colonists, they learned to cherish their privileges and duties as citizens. And as we get ready for the revolution to start, the colonists, they weren't a true democracy, but they were more democratic than England and probably the rest of Europe. They had developed democratic principles of toleration, especially religious toleration, education, equal economic opportunity, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, and representative government that were reinforced by these colonial institutions, these colonial governments, and these local governments. So the colonists had a deep sense of unique political systems. We talked about this when we talked about the Glorious Revolution. They are starting to develop a unique identity and a shared identity that is a religious identity, an educational identity, and a political identity. So they have a lot of feelings of democracy in the colonies. Now, as we get ready to see some changes here in the political systems, we need to understand something called the Glorious Revolution. So the Glorious Revolution was something that took place in England in 1688. This was the relatively peaceful overthrow of an unpopular Catholic king by the name of James II. So they overthrow James II, he's unpopular, he's Catholic, and they replace him with Dutch-born William III and Mary, who is actually the daughter of James II. So this is the couple down here known as William and Mary. And they were much beloved because they came in, and one of the first things that they did is they accepted increased parliamentary oversight and put new limits on the authority of the king, the authority of the monarchy. So they had increased the rights of Englishmen. Now, the reason why this is important is because the colonists knew that the Glorious Revolution had taken place. And what they thought is, you know what? We already basically have self-government. Yeah, we've got these royal governors, but we've been doing our own thing for a very long time. We've developed our own political systems, and there's never been that much imperial control over what we're doing, except for these royal governors. But now that William and Mary are here, and they've increased the rights of Parliament and decreased the power of the king, it's only a matter of time until the power of royal governors starts to go away, if not completely removed, and we also in the colonies will have increased rights of Englishmen. Our votes will mean more, we'll have more self-autonomy, we'll have more say, we'll have more self-government, and we'll have less oversight from the king. And they were really excited about this time period, and it really showed a period that we know in history as the period of salutary neglect. Now, the period of salutary neglect is basically from the founding of Jamestown, 1607, until the end of the French and Indian War, which is 1763. Salutary is beneficial, and we all know what neglect is. It's beneficial neglect, salutary neglect, because it allowed the colonists to develop their own political systems with a small amount of government oversight. And this gave them a sense of unique political identity and gave them a sense of very limited imperial policy and control over their political systems. And this is going to be important because after the French and Indian War in 1763, when it ends, this is going to change. Just like the lack of enforcement of mercantilism is going to change after the French and Indian War, so is the lack of enforcement of control of the monarchy over the colony's political systems. So when you are used to very relaxed rules, you have the cool parents that don't care about when you come home, there's no curfew, and then all of a sudden they're asking for the lock code to your iPhone and telling you to be home at 10 o'clock and monitoring your every move and putting rules in place, it's not going to go well. So the colonists had this period of salutary neglect of really both their economic and their political systems for a very long period of time, and when that goes away, it's going to cause so much tension and so much resentment that it's going to be one of the major seeds of liberty, one of the major causes of the American Revolution. The colonists are going to feel disrespected as men and women, they're going to feel disrespected economically, they're going to feel disrespected politically, they're going to feel their rights as Englishmen that were guaranteed to them in their colonial charters were being taken away, and we are going to set the stage for a major showdown, which eventually becomes the American Revolution. And it's going to happen after the end of the French and Indian War in 1763. So that's a little bit about the lack of imperial control of the colonial political systems. Hopefully we can start to see here how the American Revolution is going to spring up and why it's only going to take 12 years from the end of the French and Indian War until the shot heard round the world to occur, and how the American Revolution will be born. So we'll come back in the last part, in this last video, and check out the Seeds of Liberty, talk a little bit about colonial governments, and then we'll talk about the Enlightenment. We'll wrap up the unit, and then there'll be one more video to give a big wrap up and a big idea and connect what we're doing moving forward. Hope you're enjoying it. Remember, pause it, rewind it, rewatch it, do what you got to do, take some good notes. And I'll see you real soon for part 3.